if you're a Muay Thai practitioner, if you are a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner or MMA or Kung Fu or whatever it is, and if that is your art that you want to devote most of your time to, you could take 80% of your time training that, but then you can take 20% doing minimalist training with a kettlebell or maybe StrongFirst bodyweight training or barbell type training and supplement your training.
My guest for this episode is Sifu Oscar Agramonte, a Wah Lum Kung Fu instructor, strength coach, and a StrongFirst instructor based in Orlando, Florida. Oscar began his martial arts journey in Taekwondo before finding his way to Wah Lum Kung Fu. Over the past 2 decades, he has trained under Grandmaster Pui Chan, became one of the Wah Lum senior instructors, and today helps preserve and promote the art alongside Master Mimi Chan. In this episode, we discuss Wah Lum Kung Fu, Tam Tui, stand training, kettlebells, mobility, explosiveness, and the connection between relaxation and tension. We also explore how traditional martial arts and modern strength training can work together to help practitioners move better, train smarter, and continue their Shugyo for a lifetime. Let's get started. Hello, Oscar. Welcome to the Shugyo podcast.
Thank you, Swire. I'm happy to be here.
I'm excited for our conversation, and I'd like to start from your martial arts journey. Can you tell us how you get started in training in martial arts?
Sure. So I thinking about this, I think it's important for everyone to know my physical history is one of not being athletic at all. So growing up, I was comic book nerd, bookworm, a good student, but physical attributes I did not have. And when I was 16, a good friend of mine who we bonded over comic books and anime actually said, "Hey, you should come to my Taekwondo school." And I went and just loved it, signed up, enjoyed the physical aspect of it, which I was lacking. I didn't have any physical aspects. I love the hard work. And even the fact that a bunch of young, small Asian women kept kicking me in the head, right? Because I was such an uncoordinated person. And I stayed with this for a few years because what happened was this gentleman came in who's a really good fighter, and I was just like attracted to that, and I kind of followed this person for a few years, and just trained really hard. Got good cardio, learned a lot about striking and sparring, and that was my intro to it at 16 to about, I would say, almost 20, like 19 or 20 years old.
And now you're a Sifu at Wah Lum Kung Fu. How did you come up and find out about the style at Wah Lum?
Yeah, so this is really more tied to the story of my entire life because around the same time that I started martial arts, I met and became friends with Mimi Chan. Mimi Chan happened to be the daughter of very well-renowned Chinese Kung Fu master, Grandmaster Chan Pui. And so we became very good friends. We went to school together. We then went to university together. And now this year, 20 years, we're married. So once we started that part of our relationship, started dating and whatnot, there was no other avenue to go because her entire life was Wah Lum Kung Fu. And so in a really good way, this is not a negative connotation, I got sucked into that vortex. And one, it's an awesome Kung Fu style. It's really, really awesome. Two, I want to support her, right, with her mission, which is to promote Wah Lum Kung Fu. But three, something my father-in-law said many years ago when Mimi and I first started dating was, you've got to learn everything. And everything in Wah Lum is a lot, and it's a lifelong process. And I'll live my entire life and never learn everything. But it's now my entire life.
Follow-up question, and I probably watched too much Kung Fu movie. So yeah, you were training Taekwondo at the same time, and you met Sifu Mimi. And then I would assume that she somehow brought you home to see Grandmaster Chan. Did you have to show your skills, or how did they convert you to believe, to train in the Wah Lum system, or did you get beat up?
No. What happened was I had stopped for reasons of, it's not important the reasons why I had stopped doing that other training. And right around that time that I stopped, and that year long is where Mimi and I started kind of our relationship to that next level. So I had some experience, but going into the really traditional Chinese martial arts and Wah Lum specifically, it carried over somewhat, right? Being able to move around, but the specifics of Wah Lum, I was starting from scratch. You know, flexibility, leg strength, all that stuff was starting from scratch. But there was no challenge. There was intimidation because Master Chan's a very imposing figure, but him and I, we got along great right off the bat because I loved his cooking. So yeah.
Speaking of the Wah Lum Kung Fu, for listener who might not be familiar, how would you describe it to them?
Okay, so if you are, let's say if you're not familiar with Kung Fu or Chinese martial arts in general, traditional Chinese martial arts are divided into northern styles and southern styles. A good way to think of what a northern style looks like, if you're my age, which is late 40s, almost 50, is one of my favorite Kung Fu movies of all time is Martial Arts of Shaolin. And this has Jet Li doing the northern Shaolin, which shows these dynamic acrobatics and long range striking skills. And then my pronunciation is really bad, but there's a Hu Jing Quan. I don't know exactly how to pronounce it.
That was his first movie, right? That was just Jet Li's first movie. So is it that one?
His first movie, I think, was Shaolin Temple, which like boom, it put it into the stage, right? But there's another movie called Martial Arts of Shaolin, and this was directed by an amazing Hong Kong director. Again, listen, my tone of Cantonese is horrible, but Lagar Liang, who's just known through Shaw Brothers, right? So he brought in, he was able to film in mainland China with this movie, but the premise is there's the northern Shaolin and the southern Shaolin. So the northern Shaolin has the Jet Li as the protagonist doing all those dynamic, long range acrobatic movements, and the other person from the southern Shaolin had those stable stances, sharp hand techniques. So that kind of really shows the difference between northern and southern styles, Wah Lum being a northern style. But another one that did an excellent job of describing the differences between different Chinese martial arts is the animated series Avatar: The Last Airbender. They did a really good job they had the different nations, so they had the Fire Nation, which promoted the northern Kung Fu, and they had the Earth Nation, which showed the southern Kung Fu. So that kind of shows the difference for those who are maybe don't know the difference. The full name of our style is Wah Lum Tam Tui Northern Praying Mantis System. So it's a traditional northern style of Kung Fu coming from the Praying Mantis system. And it's combined with the founder of Wah Lum Kung Fu, Grandmaster Pui Chan, who uses family style called Tam Tui, and combined it with the Wah Lum Praying Mantis style.
When I was doing research, I watched some of the demonstration, right, with the Wah Lum Kung Fu. The kicking, the complexity, right, the difficulties for doing those kicks, it's just jaw-dropping. And without the flexibility, I don't think, this is going to be a hard style if you don't have the flexibility to begin with. Would you agree? Like, how would you describe the typical first encounter with Wah Lum, Oscar back then?
The first thing is, in the basics, you have what we call Baifoot Sao, Buddha hand breathing. And so you're in what we call a riding horse stance. A lot of traditional martial arts call it a horse stance, right? In Chinese, we translate it not to Ma Bo, but to Seiping Ma, which literally means a four-plane stance. So if you can visualize kind of like a box, your thighs are parallel, right? That's one line. Your hips are parallel, your shins are vertical, your back is straight, shoulders are squared up. So it's a very low stance, and we would hold that for 5 minutes. So introducing that right off the bat, an isometric wide squat basically for 5 minutes is very humbling. You realize within 30 seconds when you start shaking, right, that you just don't have the strength to hold that. And to hold it low, you also need the flexibility. So it's a blend of both. But I think in essence, with almost any movement, you have to be able to get into the position first, which does require flexibility. And then to get into the more extreme positions, you need to have not just a lot of flexibility and mobility, but you need to have the strength to get in and out of it. So being introduced to it is very humbling. Yeah.
I think it's always a question that I wanted to ask, as a martial artist, right? Do you need to have the best flexibility to be the best martial artist, or there's something else? Because there are obviously people who are talented, or maybe they're gifted, right? They're really flexible. They could go on to a full split without training. Right. But there are those of us like me, who spend their whole life trying to do a Van Damme split, but I'm still training, right? So is it really about flexibility, or can we talk about the strength, or is it more about the technique in your own view?
So it's a good question, because what I think you're trying to say is like, how can I improve in the thing that I'm trying to improve in, right? And so with something like Wah Lum Kung Fu, you have to be able to get into the position. You don't need to go to the extremes though to improve. So the mistake that a lot of people make is, I need to get in shape before I start. I need to get more flexible before I start. I need to get stronger before I start. But really the best thing to do is just to start, right? Regardless of whatever art you want to do. It can be martial arts, it can be dance, it can be whatever you want it to do. The best thing is to start, because then you're going to expose what you're lacking if you look at it the right way. One way to go about it is just hard-headedness, hard work, keep pushing. And you'll have a subset of individuals who are just naturally flexible, naturally athletic, and they almost, not that they find it easy, but they find it easy to progress. I would put myself in the same boat as you, Swire, which is I think the 16 years of me being a bookworm and not moving developed my body in a way that is just not flexible. And so what I had to do, and this was thanks a lot to a lot of the side training that I did with strength training, and going through the strength training side, learning about functional movement systems and different mobility things, is realizing, well, okay, instead of just stopping what I'm doing and focusing on my flexibility, let me target some things that can improve. So I can improve my thoracic rotation, right? My upper body rotation. I can improve my ankle mobility. I can improve a little bit of hip internal and external rotation, not to the point where I have full splits, but where it allows me to get into a better position, then it allows me to progress. That's the way that I would approach it for myself. I would approach it that way for you as well, or with anyone who's looking to do it, is like, let's take a look at how you're moving. Let's target some areas first, as opposed to, no, you need to get your full splits.
So you're saying, for you, would we find ways to make them work together to make the best out of it? So that kind of like is your philosophy. Am I correct?
The way I would look at that is almost everyone is going to go in the direction of what feels easy for them. So you could look at the online community, but you can even look at, let's say, Wah Lum Kung Fu. I can have a young lady come in who's very, very flexible, and she'll keep pursuing that flexibility to the point where like, wow, she's able to do what we call head to toe or kiss the toe, right? Where you're basically folding in a pike position, and some people are just reaching and they can grab just their foot, and some people put their head to their toe, and some people kiss their toe, right? Because they're pushing in that direction. So ultimately, the yoga practitioner continues to do yoga because they're good at it. And the strength, the bodybuilder or the power lifter continues to get stronger because they're good at it. Whereas what they probably could use is a little bit of both. So my point is never to disparage. You do whatever makes you happy. But if you want to do something like martial arts, you need to have a blend of both, right? So you need to find out, okay, you're strong enough right now. So yes, you maybe need to focus a little bit on your mobility. On the flip side, you are flexible enough right now as you are. You may need to work a little bit on your strength and stability. And so that's depending on the individual. But I think, looking back at, I'm almost 50 in the next couple of years. And so looking back, I think I would have done better if I had focused on the things that I wasn't good at, which was flexibility. I should have probably worked a little bit more on that when I was younger.
Speaking about that, so backtrack. So you start training in the Wah Lum system. And then if listener wondering, Oscar now also a strength trainer. So how did you get into that world? Is it because you wanted to be better, or is it something in the strength training world intrigued you? That's why you branch out to do that. Can you take us through that process?
Yeah, I think it goes hand in hand with the martial arts part. So the martial arts are super appealing. If you grow up, even as a book nerd, you still, at my age, you still watch Saturday morning Kung Fu theater, right? At the same time, not being an athletic person, I always looked at athleticism and said, wow, that's super impressive. So when I was my first year of high school, I joined the track and field team because I thought from watching the Olympics that I was going to look like Carl Lewis, like the sprinters, right? The sprinters having these big muscular bodies.
And they look great. They look really good, sprinters.
Yeah, they have these amazing bodies, right? And then, I could do long distance running and I still stay skinny. So it's just a lack of understanding. But the reason that I kept going towards strength training was because I was 18 years old, hormones were up. I wanted to start strength training. I wanted to change my body. And I don't know if you remember this magazine called Muscle Media.
Yeah,
Muscle. Yeah, I subscribe to that, but and what's interesting with that, what kind of really brought me to that was reading it, looking at things on the magazine, going to the gym, doing it, seeing my body change, seeing myself get stronger, from someone who had no physical capability to being like, wow, I'm feeling stronger, I'm feeling better, more confident. And of course, doing a lot of stupid stuff, right? Probably overtraining and causing myself some injuries that still haunt me, right? To the 20 years later. But along that path, I found the right type of training, which right now I attribute a lot of it to the StrongFirst methodology. But I first learned about, Pavel, who's the founder of StrongFirst, through Muscle Media. Like, he was writing articles on there that were super appealing on how to do strength training. It just spoke to me.
Is it around like the 2000 time?
Yeah, I think it was like 99, 2000, 2001, around that time. Yeah. So I was 20 years old.
Before we got into StrongFirst, I want to ask you like a cliche question, and I've been asking it to all the martial artists who come on as a guest for the show. In martial arts, we do, like, besides our technique, our forms, right? We do train, but we normally do calisthenics. We do push-ups, or maybe we do the horse stand training that you asked. A lot of time we don't do strength training at all. Like, you wouldn't think about like a Chinese martial artist to go into a gym. It's just in the movies or in the real life, they don't do that. Even with karate, things that I do, a lot of people actually are afraid to train at the gym because they think that you get muscle bound, like you're going to be slow. Yeah. Like, knowing what you know right now, how would you say to that topic?
So the question being from the traditional martial artists or the older martial artists is like, no, you don't want to do strength training because you're going to get too bulky, too slow.
Yeah, it will make you slow. You're going to be too big.
Yeah, I think there's a misconception, right? If you look at what popularized strength training or muscle building is someone like Arnold Schwarzenegger in the 80s, right? Who did bodybuilding, which is how can I hold static poses to show all of this musculature, right? And that caused a trend of people to say, oh, if I want muscles like that, I need to do that, which can make you slower if you're so muscle bound. With the way things are now, with the right type of information, you realize that strength training can take you in so many different avenues, right? So you can do strength training, yes, to build muscle, to build bigger muscle, but you could also do strength training to work on some imbalances that naturally happen from something like martial arts or calisthenics, right? So when you think about calisthenics, what did we all do? Push-ups, maybe some squats, maybe some sit-ups, right? For someone who knows about strength training now, you realize, wow, that's going to build some imbalances. If I'm just putting on muscles for pushing, what about all the pulling exercises, right? So in one way you look at it as like, well, those pulling muscles are going to build these nice big shoulders or a big back. But in other ways, if you train the right way, you don't need to build a lot of muscle, but it can balance out the shoulder to the point where, oh, these older martial artists who have shoulder injuries, maybe they wouldn't have had those shoulder injuries, right? From over punching, pushing too much and not pulling enough, or kicking too much and not working on the posterior chain and the hamstrings, right? Or only doing crunches and not working on the back side of the body. If you approach it the right way, it's a supplement that can help you iron out some imbalances and actually make your martial arts better if you approach it the right way.
That's a really interesting topic. Then let's go into it, right? I have a lot of follow-up question for you. But backtrack to the 2000 area. So you read article by Pavel, right? You think it interesting? Is that when you get into like the StrongFirst modality, messing with kettlebell? Is it like when did you started getting into the StrongFirst training?
Yeah, so the things by Pavel, what he was doing was he was really big on body weight strength, on a lot of the principles of StrongFirst, right? Which is creating full body tension and whatnot. But he was using it with a lot of how to do it when you're about to do barbells and things like that. So this is when he was writing for it. He didn't in Muscle Media do a lot of articles on kettlebell training, but there was advertisement in the back. RKC at the time, right? Was a cert that was doing. What got me into specifically, let me start training with kettlebells was actually my father-in-law. So Master Chan.
Really?
So yeah, this is interesting. So in 1998, he would go up. So Wah Lum Kung Fu, where we live in Orlando, Florida. The Wah Lum Kung Fu Temple is the headquarters for other Wah Lum schools throughout the Northeast. There's a few that are in Europe. He would go back and forth from Orlando to the New England area to do seminars. He went up one day to Boston. There was one of the Wah Lum schools who got into kettlebells. And he saw an 8-kilogram kettlebell and he hooked his foot around it, brought his leg straight up and did a Tam Tui with it.
Wow.
And the person there who had the ball was like, what? He's just like shocked, right? But he said, because at this point, Mimi and I were already dating. So this is 2008, 2009. So I'm already married, right? We're already married. So he said, oh, you know what? My son-in-law really likes strength training. He already knew that about me. And so this person sent back with him 2 8-kilogram kettlebells, right? Which is pretty lightweight, right? But I just was like, oh my God, I heard about this. And and a DVD by Brett Jones. I forget the full title, but it was like the fundamentals of kettlebell training. It was like a 5-disc set, right? And I just looked at that video, looked at the kettlebell, started training. And then I said, oh, immediately after a few weeks, I need a heavier weight. So then I got a 16-kilogram belt, and I got a 20, then I got a 24. So 2008, 2009, I was just training myself, watching the videos and doing it. And before that, I was doing more of a bodybuilding style of training. I was bulky. I was, right now I weigh 164 pounds. Back then I weighed like 178, but all very top heavy. But immediately started changing my physique by training this way. I shed a lot of that bulky weight and leaned out a little bit more. And I mean, I haven't looked back since then, since like 2009.
Yeah, it's interesting. And thank you for sharing. It's a wonderful story, right? You know, Grandmaster Chan went up and found something that, you know, Oscar should work on it.
Yeah. You know what's amazing about him is he does, for the many years that he's been around, has this instinct, a very good instinct of looking at someone and goes, I think this would be good for you. So in a way, as I look back, so I had a ton of support from my wife, but also my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, like, you know, to pursue all the strength training things that I've done. But I haven't thought about that in a long time. Even knowing that we were going to talk, I just remembered, oh yeah, that's right. He's the reason why those kettlebells came into my life. It's because he did a pistol with them in his foot, and he goes, you know what? I think Oscar would like this.
Yeah. It's interesting that, you know, when I attend my SFG1, which is the kettlebell certification with StrongFirst in 2018, I noticed that more than half are their fitness trainer, right? That's they're there to get the certification. But then the rest of them, in the majority, they practice martial arts. I've talked to people in Muay Thai. I've talked to people in karate, other martial arts too. And I'm surprised, why do so many martial artists taking this certification? But as I get deeper, as I read more of Pavel's reading, he actually referenced a lot to martial arts training in all the breathing technique, in all the how to tense up. So I wanted to ask from your point of view. So after you train with kettlebell for a while, and then you learn the deeper philosophy behind the training, how does that affect your Kung Fu training?
It's complementary and supplemental, right? So this is now where you have to know what is it that you really want to do, right? This may be a fault of mine, is that I really enjoyed the journey from StrongFirst and learning all that stuff. But I was doing it at the same time as I'm trying to improve in Wah Lum Kung Fu, which is just something that I'm not natural at. I bring this up because I think I divided my attention between both equally. And so they both equally have gone up, but gone up very slowly, right? So what I said earlier is like, you really have to know what you want. Is now at my stage of life is I want to be the best practitioner and promoter and assisting my wife in her mission of promoting Wah Lum Kung Fu and Tai Chi. And so I have to give more of my time to that. But the reason why I think a lot of martial artists like all the StrongFirst training is because it's minimalist. So you can approach it and go full in and train really hard and train daily and get a ton of benefits. But you could also, if you have something like a martial arts, which is your passion, right? If you're a Muay Thai practitioner, if you are a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner or MMA or Kung Fu or whatever it is, and if that is your art that you want to devote most of your time to, you could take 80% of your time training that, but then you can take 20% doing minimalist training with a kettlebell or maybe StrongFirst bodyweight training or barbell type training and supplement your training. And so I think that minimalist aspect appeals to someone who has a passion for something like martial arts, right? Because I said, this won't take away from me, this would only add. And then in the other part is, to your point, is the way that Pavel promoted the principles of StrongFirst was using a lot of terminology that martial artists hear already. You know, he would refer to the Japanese arts, breathing through the shield, and in the same way that you practice your kata, you should be approaching your strength training, right? You need to differentiate between, like, this is my training time, or am I just here for a workout? Is it a practice, right? When you look at the core values of StrongFirst, right? You have, I am a student of strength, right? So as a martial artist, you know that you're a student first always. You have, I'm a quiet professional. So humility, also something for that goes with a martial artist. You have, strength has a greater purpose. As a martial artist, what's the reason that you do it? To become a better person, right? It's not just to be, you don't do strength training just to be strong. You don't do martial arts just to be doing martial arts, right? So if you look at it that way, you can see how appealing it is for someone who's a martial artist.
I really enjoyed the practice part because, you know, when you say practice, you think it's not something that you just randomly do. Because, you know, if I go to a commercial gym myself, like you see people, and it's summer right now while we're talking, a lot of people go there just throw things around, or when they, you know, and it's true, a lot of them have their phone on YouTube. Right. And they look at the phone, and then they're doing whatever that the phone people are doing. That you can't call that practicing, right?
I am very lucky that you know, we have the Wah Lum Kung Fu Temple right next to it is another building, which is a small studio gym. So I haven't been to a commercial gym in a long time, and I don't think I would do well in it either, because so for example, I just told you before we started recording, I just came back from vacation, and I don't go to the gym. I was on a cruise ship. I don't go to the gym in the cruise ship. As small as the room is in my cabin room, I stay and train inside because I don't want those distractions. So you're right. There is something to, in your mind, putting it, I am going to be practicing. I am not visiting with someone. I am not watching YouTube. I am putting intention into what I'm about to do. And so that philosophy also of a practice of putting intention into what you're doing is a very martial arts aspect. The idea of I am going to spend time where I do 10 heavy kettlebell swings at the top of the minute for 20 minutes, just repeating this movement over and over again and listening to your body, and each rep learning something from it is very complementary to your martial arts training, right? Where you're like, I'm just going to be repeating this thing over and over again, listening to how my body responds to it, keep refining. You have to have the right mindset for it, but I think it's the best way to train.
I want to ask you some deeper question based on our conversation. The two main points. One is explosiveness. No matter what martial arts that you're in, at some point you have to be explosive, right? A lot of time people train in endurance, right? They do running, they do conditioning, and this jumping jack, or maybe you could do 200 push-ups. That's good for you. But
right.
We want to talk about explosiveness and also the flexibility part of it, like the strong flexibility is that if you go to the extreme range, but then you have no strength there. So
right.
Let's start on the explosiveness part of it first. Like, how can kettlebell train us to be more explosive and focus on martial artists?
For any martial artist, this would work, but to take something like Wah Lum Kung Fu, right? I was talking earlier about the stance work and the isometric strength training that you're doing, where you're just sitting in a stance. And then not only that, but you're building. So our students build pretty muscular quadriceps and glutes from holding a stance for a long time, right? The challenge with that sometimes is it builds us a little bit of an imbalance where you're so quad dominant, so glute dominant, that when you go to do something explosive like a kick, I've had students who are extremely athletic, able to jump, do all this stuff, but they do a snapping kick, which we call a heel kick or a toe kick, or in Muay Thai it's like a teeping or a front kick, where they pull their hamstring because their quads are so dominant. And the reason is because the quad is like the gas pedal, right? It's like able to snap you out, but the hamstring is what should be putting on the brakes. So then your body kind of doesn't know what to do, and you pull your hamstring. So when you look at something like kettlebell swings, you're building this hinging pattern where you're learning how to load the posterior side of your body, your glutes, your hamstring, the back musculature, to be able to load this eccentrically because of the way that the kettlebell is designed. It's able to go through between your legs, and you're over speed eccentrating it and spring loading that, and then the reverse of that into this explosive hip snap. So, I mean, by now most people have seen a kettlebell swing. Probably a lot of people have seen it done incorrectly. In my opinion, StrongFirst style is the best way to do a kettlebell swing, but that's just my opinion. I don't want to cause any arguments in the internet, but it translates really well to this explosive power that you would get from a jump, and so it mimics it's basically a static jump, right? You're not leaving the ground, but you're doing a static jump. But the beautiful part about it is, when you overload it and you're able to swing a heavy kettlebell explosively, your brain kind of gets tricked to like, I can safely put on the brakes and decelerate. And by having that in kind of programmed into your mind, into your body, into your system, when it comes time to do something explosive like jumping or a jumping type of kick, your brain knows that and knows it can decelerate. So it almost takes the brakes off and allows you to be more explosive because you've built the eccentric strength to put on the brakes. And I've seen students, and a lot of times female students get a lot of the flexibility, but maybe not so much of the explosive jumping power. But you can get them to doing kettlebell swings safely, and you can see they're more explosive and jumping kicks kind of take over. And it creates this nice balance also with the breathing, where you sniff the air in and explodes out, exhale out when you explode and you get that hip snap, that it translates to your kicking and your punching. In traditional karate and Japanese arts, you hear those kias, those big exhales. But in Wah Lum Kung Fu, a huge thing about it is we say spirit. You need to have spirit when you're doing your kung fu forms, when you're fighting, and that comes with those sharp exhales. And so something like a kettlebell swing is a safe way for someone to learn that. And then once they make the connection, this translates to my martial arts training, it's pretty seamless. It works really well. And you're able to do it in a safe way. Whereas opposed to what's the most explosive thing you can do is jump or run or sprint. it's a skill. It's a big demand for someone who's deconditioned to say, okay, we're going to build some explosive strength. We're going to get you sprinting. It's much safer to start them off with something like a kettlebell swing.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned the breathing because a couple of weeks ago, I have to explain to a student I'm trying to help when doing form, he's not breathing. He's holding in. He wants tension because he wants to look strong, right, with the form.
Right.
And I told him, like, if you don't breathe, you'll die, right? And then I found myself using some of the StrongFirst method when explaining the diaphragm breathing. Like, you don't want to exhale all the air out, then you'll be weak.
Right.
Like, you want to hold some air in, but then you want to exhale forcefully because at that time, then you also be taking in air forcefully. So that keep you going, that keep you strong. So you don't want to exhale and, I do karate, right? Exhale all the air out in your ki, then you have nothing in the tank. Then you're going to be very vulnerable at that time. So it's interesting that you mentioned that, like, I think in the breathing part, but he looked at me blank, right? He never had that concept explained to him before. Like, what are you talking about? Like, even when you talk, I think to students about the hamstring connection with the kick, right? They might not even know there's a muscle there to begin with. So I think it's sometimes it's a fun conversation to have it when people have not encountered the explanation process like that before. Like you really detail when describing it, but a lot of people will just go blank.
Yeah. So this is where the strength training and getting certified through something like StrongFirst and I've been through a ton of different fitness certifications. But the thing that I've learned a lot, and it's really over the past, like, let's say almost 10 years, is I realized, okay, my goal now in life is to help promote Wah Lum Kung Fu. I always tell my wife, I was like, you're the general. I am here and you're second in command. I don't know, military stuff, but I'm here to help whatever you need. But the reason that I love learning from different modalities, StrongFirst, functional movement systems, functional range conditioning, certified functional strength coach, which is a Mike Boyle system. The reason I love learning from all this is because I always ask when I'm learning anything, how can I use this to help with Wah Lum? How can I use this to help with Wah Lum? I'm always thinking that. When I learned something new, like the breathing through the shield, which was one of the first things I learned long ago, I immediately was like, okay, when I'm in class, how can I then help translate to students and how can I make connections for them? And that's one of the benefits of exposing yourself to different modalities. You don't need to take it all in and throw away everything that you've known. You just look and say, oh, I can take this, and I can use this to help me understand better, but ultimately I use it. How can I help make better connections for students, right? To help improve them on their journey.
Can you give us a example, like using what you know from StrongFirst to help a Wah Lum student? Like, is it getting them stronger, or is it getting them to understand more about the body-mind connection? How would you describe that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of examples. So, we've been talking a lot about the kettlebell swing, right? Which is you're hiking the bell back, you're hinging and folding at the waist, and then you explosively stand up to a standing plank, which is basically a static jump, right? So you're bending at the waist and extending. In our Wah Lum basics, we do what's called straight leg kicks as a warm up. It's basically your leg is straight, you swing it up, you swing it down, and the breathing has always been sniff as the leg comes up, exhale as you come down, and bring your leg down twice as fast as you bring it up. That is how Grandmaster Chan always taught it, right? Fast forward to me learning a kettlebell swing. You sniff as you bend your waist on the way back. You exhale as you go up and do this explosive thing. I remember training for one of the certs or recertifications, the kettlebell snatch test, right? Which is fun if you've never done 100 snatches in 5 minutes. But I remember training in the morning and then doing the same rep over and over again, and then sniff in, exhale out, sniff, exhale. And then that night doing class and doing straight leg kicks, sniff, exhale, and I was like, okay, on one side, I'm statically, my feet aren't moving, but I'm bending at the waist and exploding. And on the other side, I'm picking up my leg, but I am folding up the waist. That's when I sniff in. And then when I'm explosively straight, I exhale out. And so that translate right there is like, hey, that's one way. So that's right away with the breathing. Another thing that's really good for martial artists is kettlebell clean, because when you clean the bell, right, in the way that we learn with StrongFirst, and you have it in that rack position and you're strong and you've got your great posture, you don't, the belt, your arm isn't jammed all the way into your body, right? It's in a strong position and it's also not far away from you. So when you think of something defensive where you're trying to absorb someone's power, you absorb it so much better in that strong rack position. Not if my arm was completely straight and someone tried to blast into me, I wouldn't be able to absorb it. So I teach that all the time as well. You know, if you're doing something like a striking or conditioning class, is learning how to absorb force. Kettlebell clean is a really great way to do that. And a kettlebell swing just translates so well to not just kicking, but punching and the hip snap, you know, the breathing, integrating it all together.
I'm curious, like, have you talked to Grandmaster Chan about the breathing that you learned from StrongFirst, that with the collation that you think is same as one of the breathing that he does in the basics at Wah Lum?
So I haven't talked to him about that because if I'm going to talk to him about it, it's always like, what can I learn? Not, hey, let me bring in this thing, right? There's also, even though he speaks English and Cantonese, he speaks both. Like, I don't really speak Cantonese, but he speaks to me in Cantonese and English. It's a mixture of both. So it would be hard for me to communicate that to him. But the other Master Chan, which happens to be my wife, who's the one who's taking over, we talk about that all the time, right? She uses me as a resource of like, okay, we'll have a conversation like that and then just say, okay, at our next maybe instructor workshop, let's go over this with our instructors and assistant instructors and see if we can connect dots in ways that they can take it for themselves, but then also take it to our students. So those conversations are being had all the time, but honestly, not with my father-in-law, Grandmaster Chan, but with my wife, who's also my teacher, she's also my Kung Fu teacher, the other Master Chan.
Nice. Let's talk about the second part, which is strength. And I wanted to tie it in with tension and relaxation, right? So when you move through forms or when you move through the exercise, you have to be loose enough, right? So your body can move. But then when the point of impact or when the point of finishing up the technique, it has to be tense. So can you talk about that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, in StrongFirst is where I first heard tension and relaxation are opposite sides of the performance coin, right? It's a great analogy. You can't have one without the other if you want to be successful. When the kettlebell swing, which we keep talking about it, right, mimics kind of like an explosive punch, where you're in a relaxed position. Your body has to create this pulse, tension out of somewhere to allow maybe like a punch to start moving, right? So your body creates this pulse, created through a little bit of tension. Instantly, you have to switch to being relaxed to allow the body to travel in a relaxed. But then if you're going to implement it and interact with something that's not moving, like you're trying to throw a punch, you need to create tension at that moment of impact, boom, and then immediately become relaxed to bring your arm back to be in a defensive position. So that pulsing of tense, relax is the way that you see fighters, the best fighters, do it, right? When you're doing things like forms in your style of in karate, but also in the Kung Fu forms, you're transitioning from stance to stance and then pausing, right? So you're moving from one thing to another. You can't be tense the entire time as you're moving, right? And then you have to also sync it with your breath. There is an optimal time to be taking an inhale and an exhale when you're doing not just strength training, kettlebell training, but also when you're doing your martial arts training, right? You don't want to be throwing a strong punch or a kick and then doing a slow inhale, right? It kind of doesn't make sense. But you also can't be holding your breath. You have to be exhaling and taking a sharp inhale. You know, you mentioned that you were trying to help a student with like, yeah, if you're not breathing, man, you need to breathe. Right? You need to exhale for your Kia or whatever. But something that I notice a lot, because we emphasize a lot of spirit in our forms. It's a really big thing of Grandmaster Chan is you need to make, if you're doing a form, the person watching you do the form should be afraid of you because you're showing that spirit. But one thing that I've noticed is they're missing sometimes that sharp inhale. So you could have a student with a lot of spirit and try to do power, and they're just exhaling, and they're missing that sharp inhale. And then they wonder, like, I don't know why I'm out of breath. I'm like, you exhaled for a full minute. There was never a time you took a sharp inhale. And so being able to not just tense and relax, but also sync it with your breath is something that I'm still working on. It's something that any martial arts works on. And the idea of being able to be tense and then relax. Another thing that I learned a long time ago from StrongFirst and reading and the instructors there is learning that the highest level athletes aren't known because they're able to produce the most tension or produce the most relaxation, but they are separated from normal people like myself, maybe you, right? We're normal people. The highest level athletes are able to switch at a way faster rate. They're able to go tense, relax, like a light switch, on and off. And it's something that I'm still working on, will probably work on for the rest of my life.
I was going to ask you that question. How do you learn that? But you should say answer.
Well, let's take it as a theory of, hey, how would we teach someone to do this, right? To learn to
let's put it in like a form situation, right? So people listening can relate to. So while you're moving through the form, you got to be relaxed. But when you finish a technique, it has to be strong. But in between, you shouldn't tense yourself too much, so you get all tired or you're winded at the end. So I think that's what usually happens in a format. They're too tense, wanted to impress the spirit, and then they don't breathe, and they're so tense, the muscle, it end up moving like a robot. Like, have you seen that?
Oh, actually, we've seen it all the different things. When you typically are learning a form, a sequence of movements, right? Where you're going in multiple directions, and these forms are shown to express and show your style, the particular style that you're practicing. But also, it's like, oh, imagine it fighting multiple opponents in different directions, and there's a bunch of different reasons for doing the form. If you were to say, okay, now I want to work on what the elite athletes are able to do, being able to turn on and off that tension and relaxation, you're going to have to break the form down. So you would take a section or a couple of moves, or maybe one or two moves, and something where you move from a horse stance to a hill climbing horse stance and doing some kind of punch. And maybe you would practice that slowly and say, how would I sync my breath with this move? Okay, now I'm going to speed it up. Now I'm going to see how much tension I can create when I execute my punch. And now, okay, as soon as I throw my punch, let me see if I can quickly move back into to transition to another stance. So that's, I think, one way that you can go deeper into your practice, where if you try to do it for, some of the forms can be very long. If you're like, I'm going to try to master this for the entire form, it may not be possible at a lower level, at a more beginner or intermediate level, maybe when you get more advanced. But I think anyone from beginner to advanced can benefit from, okay, I'm going to take these few moves, 1 or 2, 3 moves. I'm going to keep doing them over and over again. This time that I do it, I'm going to work on how strong I can punch. Okay, this time I'm going to see how quickly I can relax. Now I'm going to work on my breath work. Now I'm going to work on my transitioning. And you just keep repeating and keep repeating. And then you try to then say, okay, now I'm going to work on multiple modalities. So in our style, we have where there's internal and external elements. Some of the internal elements being your spirit, your respiratory strength, right? Some of the external elements being your stances or your footwork. And so sometimes when we're teaching things to students, we say, okay, I just want you to focus on one internal element. Focus on your breath, your respiratory strength. Okay, this time now you're just going to focus on one external element. I want you to focus on your eyes, on your focus. Okay, now I want you to work back and try to do two things, one internal, one external element. And there's 10 total, right? And so the accumulation of an expression of something done to its full ability is you being able to tie in and bring everything into one move. And that's why I said it's a lifelong process. And I may not ever get there. I think Brett Jones said, I still haven't done the perfect swing, but I'm still, Brett Jones being the director of StrongFirst education for decades, right? I'm still working on the perfect swing. I don't have it yet, but I'm working on it. Something to that effect, right?
Yeah, work in progress. Yeah, it's always work in progress. So a lot to think about, really, but knowing our conversation is going, I do see the strength world merging with the martial arts. It's just something that maybe it's different language that normally we don't think of in a traditional martial art way.
Yeah. I mean, I've noticed that right off the bat. I remember showing my wife a picture of Pavel when he was doing muscle media. He was doing a one-arm push-up and he was doing a pistol. And the first thing Mimi said was, oh, that's just like my dad doing a Tam Tui, right? And so ever since then, this is over 20 years ago, right? I've always seen, and I don't want to call them fads, but I've seen trends and things go and come and go in strength training and fitness that have always been there in martial arts. 12 years ago, breathing was the new thing in strength training. The importance of breathing. I mean, it's the first thing we learn as martial artists, right? This is why StrongFirst is very appealing. I can't go on YouTube right now without seeing some influencer saying something like, do this one move and it would change your life. And that move is either it's either a horse stance, which you do in Kung Fu every day, or it's what we call side to sides, but it's like a lateral lunge, right? In Kung Fu, we call it a side to side. In circuit training, it's a lateral lunge. Lateral lunge will change your body forever. Try this new fitness move called a combat stance. It's basically like a collapsed kneeling stance, which we do in our style all the time. So I've always seen this. I've always seen this thing of on the fitness side, a new trend or a new move, which has always been there in a lot of traditional martial arts. And I don't say that to disparage the fitness stuff, right? It's some people are trying to promote good things and some people are just trying to make money, But if you decide I'm going to become a traditional martial artist, like you're doing karate, right? Or I do Kung Fu, and you seeing something on the fitness side that looks similar to what you're doing, and that fitness person explains it in a way that clicks for you, and you're able to go, oh, okay, this is not brand new because I've seen it before, but now they've explained it in a way that's going to benefit my martial arts training. I'm all for it. Go for it. It's awesome. That's what I do all the time. I look at something, I'm like, oh, okay, you know what? I like the way they use those words and they explain that. Maybe I can help myself or help a student get into a certain move. But I don't like, the one thing that I'd say I won't like is when someone says, I've created this new move. And you look and go, dude, you're doing a pistol, which is, it's been, my father-in-law's been doing it for 60 years, like so like, I'm not saying that a lot of people do that, but some people do, right? And so
I think a lot of times we need to train ourselves, learn how to relax as well, because I think kettlebell, what works for me, and I'm giving away my secret kind of, like when inspiring, I sometimes will have better cardio condition than younger opponent, is because when I do kettlebell training, I normally do the 2-arm swings. In 5 minutes, I do 100 reps. And then in between, I have about 8 seconds or so of rest. So in that 8 seconds between the first and the next set, I learn how to relax strongly. I do whatever that I do to become strong. And I feel like that's helped me in martial arts, because in a sparring situation, you go at it, right? And then you back off and then you go at it again. I feel like I know how to relax more versus when we back up. I notice a lot of time people still get tense. They're not relaxing. So at the end, I could actually pick them apart because I could see that they're sweating. They're not moving as fast. Like in the beginning, they're faster, right? But then I tire them out purposely, right? I know that when we go at it, they're tight, and then they're still tight when we back off. So do you notice like by learning the kettlebell, like you have to learn to relax, like especially for your snatch test? Somehow you got to relax on the way down. Really, it's shorter than less than a second. Like, how can you talk on that a little bit, please?
Yeah. So the kettlebell snatch test for StrongFirst is 100 snatches with me for my weight, 24 kilograms, right? 53 pounds, 100 snatches in 5 minutes. Typically you do 10 snatches in about 24 seconds ish. maybe no. So 20, you can get 20 snatches in about 45 to 50 seconds, right? Which is an explosive, demanding thing. So you're working a kettlebell in between your legs, and all the way up to vertical, like a vertical pressing position at the top, and you're repeating that over and over again. And so there's different ways to do it. My favorite way to do it is I'd get my 10 swings left, 10 swings right, set it down for 10 seconds, pick it back up, rinse and repeat, 5 minutes. You're going to be breathing really hard. But during the 10 seconds that is down, you do want to fully relax. You do, in StrongFirst, we call them fast and loose drills. But in traditional martial arts and Chinese martial arts, Kung Fu and Tai Chi, we shake things off all the time, to try to do that. The benefit of doing it with a kettlebell is, to take your example of your 100 swings in 5 minutes, right? You are training yourself in a way where it's safe because you know how to do the technique correctly, but you can push yourself really hard, but you know that no one's coming to punch you right then and there. But you're learning how to be explosive, 15, 20 seconds, set it down, relax for 10 seconds. So, and then you take that into a combat application, like sparring, and you see people gas out all the time, right? Because they're not practicing how to tense and relax, tense and relax. Yeah, it's happened to me as well, where it's a larger opponent, and I'm like, you know what? I just got to wait 10 more seconds. Yep, there you go. They're gassed out. Now you pick them apart a little bit, right? You hope that you don't get hit with one of their big strikes, though, right? But that tension and relaxation and the breathing, that's kind of a real, if you can make the connection to your martial arts, there's a real benefit to it, because when you're able to practice with the kettlebell, but you're thinking, how am I going to also implement this later on? You're in a safe environment as long as your technique is sound, right? As long as you've got the right technique, you're not going to hurt yourself. Kettlebells are extremely safe if you do them correctly, right? But you're also training your body to fight fatigue, to learn how to shake off tension, how to build explosive strength, how to breathe correctly. You set the kettlebell down, but no one's coming to kick your ass right then and there, right? So then you're able to say, okay, I'm going to take these skills. And this is a lot of what's been known a lot in that StrongFirst community of the what the hell effect of like, man, I was just doing kettlebells and I was just doing swings and get-ups. And it's improved so many other things. It's translated to so many, like what you explained with when you're doing your sparring, right?
I really like how you explain it. Now I'm thinking it deeper, because I know that after this 10 swings, especially on later on, in the set, I know kind of I'll get winded, but I know that I'm not at the point to go failure, right? So I actually have that feeling. So when I spar, I had that feeling. Then I'm telling myself, you have to back off probably a little bit now, maybe wait a couple seconds until you're ready, then you go again. Because if you keep going and going and going, at some point for everyone too, then you start gassing, and then to the point that then you cannot recover. So when you're talking, I was thinking about that. So I'm actually learning how to be very uncomfortable, right, for the body. But then I also know that whatever that I need to do to maybe tone it down a little bit, then I could go back again. So I think that's a really good exercise. As you're saying too, without being punches, kicks, throwing at my face.
But it's you're actually it's a really good point, because not only you're learning what your capacity is, right? So let's say you're doing your kettlebell swings, right? You're at minute 4. So even though you're like, I know I got to do these next 20 swings in this minute, I'm going to push myself. But you've learned that you're kind of creeping up to what we call we say in StrongFirst, those stop signs. Like with the right type of training, we would stop when we're doing our strength training, because you want to always be fresh and do every rep the best that you can. But the benefit to you saying, I'm going to do 5 minutes of swings, I'm going to get 100 swings in 5 minutes. Well, that session's going to tire you out a little bit right towards the end, but you are learning, that you're if you take the tension part as rust, you're building rust. I don't want to keep going till the rust is covering me up completely, but I feel like it's creeping up. So to your point, like what you said earlier, oh, maybe I'll back up now. I'm going to recover. Okay, now I'm going to build back up, and I'm going to recover. And so you can make that correlation, and then you can take that not just to your sparring, but you could do it when you do your forms training as well. The old methodology of keep training till you fall down. I always try to emphasize with the students on the martial arts side is, yes, there are times where you have to push hard, but you can't push to exhaustion every training session. You're not going to improve. Your body needs to learn when to back off, when to go, to push hard. So this is just another benefit of having something like kettlebell swings or the right type of training methodology that allows you to learn, what your capacity is. Push yourself hard sometimes, but most of the times you should leave your training session feeling better than when you went in.
For listener who wanted to learn more about the Wah Lum Kung Fu and then your training methodology, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, thanks. So wahlum.com, WAHLUM.com is where you'll find the main Wah Lum website, everything you need to know about the Wah Lum Kung Fu Temple. It's got links to other Wah Lum schools if you happen to be in one that's near you. It's got my contact information as one of the instructors there as well. So I would just direct anyone to go onto wahlum.com if you want to learn more about that. And then through there, you can find me if you want to learn more about the strength training stuff as well.
Thank you, Oscar, for coming on today. I learned a lot from you.
I appreciate it, Swari. Thanks for having me on.